Zia, you want to introduce yourself first?
Sure thing. So I am Zia. I've been in crypto sort of personally since about 2013, and professionally since about 2015. So then I've been working between VCs and projects and kind of helping them to manage growth and potential, and also working with VCs on their portfolio companies and trying to sort problems out that they may have. And now I have my own fund. So, it's called Matterblock. Myself and my partner, Han Kohilier, we work kind of with projects to bring them to market. So really early, first money in, and we kind of incubate them and bring them to market. So help them with everything from tokenomics all the way through to marketing and raising money, and obviously as well as allocating our own capital. So yeah, so that's me, and I'm looking forward to this chat.
Awesome. So I guess one of the main goals of this chat is to just share a little bit more about two things. The first one is being a woman in the space is not a bad thing, because apparently there are some like gender biases in the space, but it's okay. Being a woman is actually quite great. And so what does that entail? It entails two things. The first one is I realized that when we look at investment or we look at these different projects, there is a specific kind of, I don't know if it's a feminine trait, not in a gender way, but just a trait where people are more risk averse in terms of investing instead of just aping in, and also just being more conservative in general. So I guess it's something that definitely want to chat a little bit more about and hear from your perspective. And before we start, maybe I can also introduce a little bit about myself. So my background is in economics, and I came into the space because I looked at economics just like when you're building your own planet on Mars. And if you can define your own Newtonian physics, which is physics is really the rules that we have to govern by when we live in an environment. And I see economics being the rules that governs ecosystems, digital ecosystems. So that was extremely cool. And so I built a lot of like token models and all these different economics that is governed or have rules embedded in tokens, in smart contracts, to govern how we exist, how we play around, and how we distribute and coordinate in a decentralized way. So that was very cool. And then DeFi boomed. And so you have a lot more conversations around investing and around DeFi. And one of these things that I'm struggling with is telling these projects that, okay, I understand that you want your tokens to be structured this way, or you want the rules of the game to be structured this way to increase as much as, to increase the returns or to increase things going up only. But there are a lot of risks to consider, and it will affect the alpha in the short run, but it can make your system a lot more robust in the long run. And that conversation usually takes a long, long time. Do you hear that? Do you experience that too, Zia?
I think, that's an interesting one, right? Like, I think that, that kind of conversation, is quite telling as to the kind of founders that you're looking at and that you're talking to. So, of course, especially in a market like this, you have people who come in and their ultimate goal is, dollar signs in the eyes, right? So, and that hockey stick up, right? But, and I think a lot of tokenomics that are coming out right now and projects that we're seeing are kind of very much focused on that short-term uptick. I think that, I agree with you in the longer term, structuring it well is really important. And having those conversations is really important. I think for me, team is kind of almost first. So when I'm talking to a team and if we're on the same page with that kind of stuff, that kind of takes it to the next step automatically. So if they're kind of reticent and you kind of see, okay, well, they're really in it to kind of make short-term money and we're not going to see anything. Obviously, reputation-wise, that doesn't look good for you as a fund if you've invested in that And believe me, there are funds out there that will. So, there are funds out there that are looking for the short-term gains, and obviously everybody wants some of that. But there's, I think, two kind of strategies at play. So you can kind of have a short-term strategy alongside your long-term strategy, and that's where you get smart, and you kind of, those two sort of run alongside each other, sort of nudging each other along. And so long as you've got that in mind, I think it can work. But yeah, it is difficult to have those conversations sometimes. But for me, it's sometimes almost a qualifier with the team.
Yeah, for sure. I think also having background in finance would bring in the conversation of risk, whereas a lot of brilliant but great people, their experience is also a little bit more on the code side, technical side of things. So it's more of, how do I make this a lot more efficient in a very direct way, than also thinking a more robust, all-rounder way, and looking at things beyond the current status quo that we are looking at, or this small ecosystem that we're looking at. Do you experience that?
Yeah, I think you're right. And actually, I do think this may be where there's women have some strengths, is looking at things quite holistically, and I think that is a benefit. I'm not saying men wouldn't do that too. I'm sure a lot of them do, but it takes a good holistic look at things that work. So everything from team to tokenomics to technology to marketing. Obviously, all of these things are important. I've kind of experienced it from both sides. So I've experienced working with investors in my own company who look at really just specifically one thing, and that's, revenue, or how much money you're making. And this is back in the day. And not really caring about kind of the vision of the product or the technology so much, And so I think different investors, you'll get different, different kind of optics. But, for me, yeah, I think team is first for me, but I will look kind of, holistically at everything else. And technology is also, is great, but the team has to be able to execute that. And so, yeah, they all factor in with each other, I think. So, yeah.
Yeah, completely agree. And also, we have Anna here right now. So, hi, Anna, welcome. We have been chatting a little bit about looking at things from a holistic view, and to understand the different kind of almost different kind of specialization versus generalist perspectives in these kind of teams for these kind of token-based protocols. So, Anna, thanks for joining us. And do you want to introduce yourself first?
Sure. Hi, Lisa. How are you guys? Sorry, I'm a little late. So introduce myself. Sure. So my name is Anna Vladi, and I am right now part of a project which is trying to bring cross-yield and cross-chain strategies into DeFi space. We're basically seeking alpha. We're building an autonomous hedge fund and trying to bring the enterprise-grade analytics to that user interface that the majority of people is familiar with, taking complexity out, and also trying to get the highest yield possible for the investors. And before that, I was in corporate world for many, many years. I left about 5 years ago and kind of jumped head into blockchain space, did a Women's Hackathon, like was actually the first one in New York City. And was after that building Fiat Crypto Gateway for blockchain space. And now basically part of this Force DAO initiative.
Fantastic. So we were also talking a little bit about risk versus returns, and also managing risk. And I was talking a little bit just now about how being a woman is a little bit more about looking at things from a more holistic view and managing taking in more considerations of risk and being more conservative in these kind of strategies. So I remember we talked about that a few days ago. And do you want to share a little bit about risk taking in the DeFi space?
Very interesting, actually, point. I think we're, as women, just in general, look at everything as an integrated world. We don't compartmentalize like men do. I think that's the major difference, right? So when we're looking at something like an investment strategy, of course, we are definitely assessing risk from a little bit of a different angle. And I think we're checking 7 times before we push that send button, for sure. So that's definitely there. What also I think is interesting is we bring, I think, into the space also in terms of just the worldview, right? Because a lot of, depending where you're coming from the different backgrounds, right? You can also bring that into the mix. So yeah, for sure. I mean, we definitely bring in a new and different perspective into that. And I think we're more risk averse than men from that perspective, I would say.
Yeah, I think so too, because I'll think 3 times before I say anything. And I don't know if that's good or bad, because sometimes there's an opportunity cost in taking a longer time to make a decision. And especially in a bull market or in a raging market like this today, there is actually real monetary cost in taking a longer time to make these decisions. And especially Zia, you're doing funds. How is that, like, how does that opportunity cost come into play?
Well, I mean, what I will say, I'm probably slightly different because I usually make decisions really, really quickly and quite definitively. That is, a kind of a snap decision based on team. However, then I go kind of deep in. So I'll make a decision and then I'll give myself a little bit of time to qualify that decision, right? So my decision is usually made up really, really quite quickly, but I will kind of, check myself on that decision and kind of go deeper in, based on that. But yeah, the opportunity, cost is an interesting one. I think, there's a couple of opportunities that we've had recently. There was one in particular that that I did jump on, and now it's within a few months. It's like, I think it's like 300x or something crazy like that. And I just didn't. I had too much else going on, and especially in this market, you get like 1 million projects across your desk every day, and I just missed it. So it kind of went to the bottom of the pile because I didn't even have the time to make that snap decision that I was talking about to even get to the qualifying stage. So yeah, I definitely think that that's the opportunity cost is a factor especially in the bull, but I don't know that that's exclusively down, a female thing. Like I know of plenty of male investors who've also had similar kind of stories. So and actually, it also depends sometimes on culture as well. I think I've worked across the world, and I think sometimes decisions can be made quicker in other places over certain geographies. So yeah, I think I'm probably slightly different in terms of making the decisions, because I do make them quite quickly, but then qualify them, and I won't usually hang around for longer than a week on making a decision. So yeah, maybe that's kind of not the answer you're looking for, because it's not really in line with what you guys are saying, but certainly how I operate.
But is it really about the speed of making decision or how we look at the decision? Like I, for example, make decisions very quickly as well. But I think the point that I was trying to bring across is not really the speed of the decision, because that's different, right? It's really about looking at something from different perspectives. and you can do that quickly as well.
Yeah, no, I certainly agree with you on that, Anna. And just before you joined, we were talking about that, like kind of that different worldview and taking into account a lot of different elements. And like you said, I think it's a really good point in terms of compartmentalizing. Whereas, yeah, and certainly for me, I think, everything's kind of interconnected and yeah, I agree with you on that. 100%. Yeah, less about the speed and more about the way in which we look at things. And I think, to be honest, and it's interesting because if you look at actual traditional investment, so we're not talking crypto investment, as a whole, female investors and female-led companies, there's some data out there that says that that many of them are actually more successful by margin. So I'm not saying that women are better, but I do think that it helps to have that kind of holistic view. It really, you're thinking maybe perhaps in a more agile way about the different things that can benefit or hurt a project. So yeah, I definitely agree with you on that.
Yeah, completely agree on the decision-making part, especially. So it's not about the execution of decision or the making of decision. It's the decision-making process where you're taking in more things to think about before making that decision. And when we look at, so it's a very good point that you brought up women in traditional finance, for instance, or women in leadership roles. I think there's a selection bias as well, because there are only so many women in leadership roles. So, and to get up to one of these roles, it takes somebody to get there. So then there's really a selection bias in that position or in that environment. Then it becomes quite unfair to just say that companies with women leaders are actually outperforming companies with male leaders.
Yeah, you're right. I mean that data set isn't large enough probably. But it's at least there is some data out there that kind of backs it up. But yeah, the data set probably isn't large enough based simply on that fact that you brought up. So yeah. But I think there's opportunity for women, particularly in this space, to really, I guess, bring a different view and bring some opportunities to the space that I think haven't really been explored. So because of the way that we look at things, DeFi, and I've said this kind of in other rooms, but for me, we're almost rebuilding financial system, right? So we're not just kind of tacking onto it. And long term, for me, that the goal is that we're really rebuilding the financial system, which is a huge deal. And I think with that, women have real opportunity and an important part to play.
For sure, I agree. And so what can we do to bring more women in? I see a lot of projects trying to hire more women or opening roles just for women. And I don't really agree with that, because I believe very much in meritocracy, and you should be judged based on your merits, not based on whatever you're born with or any religion or whatever. So how can we bring more women in without discriminating the role in the first place?
Lisa, I think that we spoke about that as well. I told you I'm totally with you on that. I don't think it's about opening up roles for women. I think it's about finding the right connections with women already in the space. I think it's about education, and I think it's about helping them open up the barrier of entry, because I feel like the space is very intimidating, and it would be helpful if you have other women that are welcoming, right? So that you feel that you have a counterpart on the other side. Oh, this woman comes from similar background and space that I come from, and she's doing great over there. And don't forget, we're all, like, I left corporate world. It was a big move, right? And it's a big move for a lot of people, because you're used to, it's a cushy job, it's a nice paycheck, it's stability, right? And here you kind of a little bit, sink or swim. There's a little bit of that, of course. and it's unknown, right? It's so new, and it's everything that's been built is new. It's never been done before. It's scary. So I feel like we as women that are in the space should kind of make that barrier of entry open and welcoming. I think that's the part that we should play.
Why do you think that the space is more intimidating to women than men? Because if that's the root of the problem, that's something that we can solve.
I think why it's intimidating because you were talking not just finance, right? Which is actually a pretty complex world in itself. You're also talking technology, right? You're also talking mathematics. You're also talking economics. So there's a lot of very complex subjects in here. And the women that I've spoken to, for example, they feel that they don't have enough knowledge. They want to look foolish or stupid, things like that. So yeah, that's how I would describe it. Intimidating space. And I think you have to have a certain maybe character. I feel like you either need somebody to be able to pull you in and welcome you in, or you have to have this character trait where, you know what, I can do this. So you either have to have that personality type that you can go in yourself and go forward with that, or you have to have that other counterpart on the other side that will pull you in.
So pulling people in is kind of like mentorship.
Yeah,
it's someone guiding you and holding your hands to.
Exactly, that's one of the ways, right? I mean, it's knowledge transfer, it's mentoring, it's providing opportunities, right? So all those things kind of fall in line with that.
When talking about opportunities, for some reason, when you're a female in the space, people kind of naturally think that you're in marketing and advertising or beauty.
I know. It's terrible. You're a CMO. Oh, you must be a CMO. I know. That's unfortunately the stereotype. So yeah, we have to break it. We really have to break it. But I do see a lot of women engineers, and I always get excited when I see women engineers and when I see women strategists and building things. And I always want to chat with them and understand how they got in and to see how we can get more women like that. Because we have a lot of women engineers in just traditional finance, right? So there has to be, different mechanisms of how we can bring them here. It shouldn't be that different to take that knowledge and apply it here. So I feel like reaching out, that's basically what I did with my hackathon a couple of years ago. I was working at Accenture at the time when I did it. I literally reached out to my technology department and I said, guys, we're doing this, and all these women that are engineers and programmers and project managers even said, come over, you will learn, you will actually go through a hackathon, and maybe you'll like it and maybe you won't, but you will be the judge of that. At least here's an opportunity. So.
Yeah, Anna, I think you definitely kind of hit the nail on the head when you said, it can be intimidating. And one of the things that you mentioned, I think, and I've heard it as well, is, I don't want to look foolish. And I think that's interesting because, it is maybe a trait of women where, you kind of maybe a little bit more cautious to put themselves out there in that regard. Although I've been in lots of clubhouse rooms and women coming up on stage and asking, sort of beginner questions. And I feel like Clubhouse has been quite good for getting some beginners in. And I've definitely seen a lot of women kind of come up and not be so afraid to ask those questions, certainly in some of those, more welcoming rooms. And I guess that's part of what, we're sort of aiming to do here. And I think, education, there is so much information out there. And I think, if you're pushed in the right direction, you can find that information. Women engineers, I've seen a lot coming up, and that excites me too. I think that's fantastic. And yeah, you're right in terms of the marketing. It's like that's the typical stereotype, but I do see more women moving into other roles, and I think we're definitely sort of making moves in the right direction, and yeah, welcoming people, getting people in to the space. I know with some of my female friends, they all came to me very a few years ago asking me, okay, what's crypto about? Tell me about crypto. So now I've gotten, a bunch of female friends into crypto over the years, and now they understand it better. And I think having, I guess, female voices in the space who can kind of be encouraging is quite important. So yeah, I'm totally with you on that. And that's part of the reason why I try and make myself available if people come and ask me questions. And my partner often says, you're too busy to do these kinds of things. And I say, well, yeah, but I want to kind of, I want to move the space forward and move the needle. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm totally with you. The other way I think, could be very interesting, is I think every woman that works in corporate, we all have 401ks, right? Everybody's investing. I'm hoping that a lot of the women are actually taking an opportunity and learning themselves how to invest and not just giving it to a broker, and actually sitting themselves on E-Trade and learning all the stocks and what to do with options and things like that, right? So one of the ways to get them into DeFi space, for example, is to say, oh, by the way, if you get in, you could probably make 3x, 2x, sometimes 10x on different projects, depending on what you're going to do with them, right? So that could be interesting, right? Because if women that are already investing and women that are investing into their, different funds and, whatnot, I think that could be an interesting way to get them in. I know I did get few of my girlfriends in this way. I couldn't get them in to do anything else. I mean, I'm trying to, but they have cushy corporate jobs and they're comfortable there. But at least they're already in a different environment and in a different market, and at least they're diversified that way. So that's, I think, another interesting way to do that.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point. Like, you have a lot of, I guess, content creators who teach people how to get into the space, and a majority of them are still male. They're teaching them how to invest or how to get started on investing in crypto and things like that. And a majority of them are still male. Like a lot of the top influencers, they're all still male. So I think it's there's definitely room for more female voices in that kind of arena, kind of the influencer arena in the space. And that could be a neat thing to see kind of come up as well. When when people see that they're making money, they get excited, they're happy. So I think, even if they're not going to leave their cushy corporate jobs, they can kind of come in that way. And support that way. Yeah.
Exactly. And then I also see what's happening is some of those women are creating those retail small funds, and they're actually investing into some projects together. So I see actually a little bit of that, which is also exciting. But I actually saw a few of them because they send me messages and send me a few projects, and they're like clearly scams. And so these women are so new to the space, they couldn't recognize, like Polkadot, for example, was doing an airdrop. Like, Polkadot would not be doing an airdrop right now, right? You know this, right? But then she sends me the site, and everything looks so real. It's all the colors, and there's so much action going on. The wallets are flying. And she goes, no way, this is happening. And I'm like, at least go to Twitter. Just go to Twitter, go to Polkadot and see, because this is clearly a scam. But it looks so real. And only somebody who's in the space for a little bit knows that there's no way this is happening, right? So, I think yesterday I saw one with Uniswap. I don't know if you guys saw that one, which is, Uni would, supposedly Uni would put money into the wallet, into MetaMask, right? But you can't prove it.
Yeah. Cause they just released V3, right? So that, so the scammers are piggybacking off the back of that. Yeah.
Of course.
It's crazy.
It's right there. It's right there. And what about all the phishing sites, right? They look so real. They look exactly like a copy of the actual, some platform that you want to go to. So that's another thing. This is why if somebody goes in and gets burned and God forbid loses like a nice chunk of money, that's going to be a huge deterrent, right? So, because this is high risk, high reward environment, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
absolutely.
There's definitely that going on as well. So.
Yeah, getting wrecked is not fun.
Nope, that's not at all.
It is not fun, but a very interesting conversation that I had for a while now is that it's important for people to get wrecked often enough, because they need to realize that you have to think about risks. But then again, now that I remember, all these people are actually males. And everyone's like, yeah, you need to get wrecked once in a while to understand what risk management is. And losing your own funds is the best learning lesson. Then you actually know how to do risk management.
That's very true.
That's an interesting point, and I think you're right. I think sometimes though it's heartbreaking when you see people who have risked way more than they were actually able to, and that's when it's not great to get wrecked, and because then they can't even come back from it. You know what I mean? So or at least it'll be a lot harder for them to. And I think, but that's a whole other, that's a kind of whole other thing, and that's kind of personal responsibility as well. And education. But yeah, I think that's an interesting point.
I think it could be a very fun clubhouse to just listen to stories how people got wrecked.
Oh my God, yes, wrecked stories would be
We should totally do that. We should totally do that and invite Julian to run it.
Yeah, just like the time I got wrecked and what happened. Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, it's interesting because you even have people who work very deeply in the space. I think recently, and I forget the name. I think it's Nexus. The guy from Nexus, I think it was. He's like the CEO of the company, and he works in crypto every day. And I think he had something like 15 million stolen from him.
Yeah.
Wow.
Some people went into his wallet and got the funds out.
Yeah, well, so they had sent him like some phishing thing to his Windows computer, and it basically taken over his Windows computer, and they changed the essentially the receiving address of this right in the MetaMask. So yeah, it's not just newbies that get wrecked, so it's just about, I guess, being cautious and really kind of managing that.
So Anna, let's go a little bit back to your Women Hackathon. How did you get that out? What's the response? And did the women all come into, or were there a lot of people coming into the crypto space?
So we had huge success actually. So this was 2018. Yeah, 2018 in October. So we did it at NYU Law School. And we actually had multiple tracks. We didn't have just technology track. We had a business track, technology track, and a legal track. And the legal track was there just because, as you know, there's a huge regulatory burden, right, on a lot of different projects depending on what you're trying to build. And that's important. So I was able to bring a lot of women lawyers, right? We brought a lot of women engineers, and then we brought a lot of business people, project managers, different, directors, whoever they were from different corporations. We had about 130 women participating. We also had students, and they were given different tasks to do during the hackathon. Some of them were building, some of them doing business models, some of them were doing legal models, really depending on the track. And then they were presenting. So, and this was a hype, right? This was actually, a great ICO times, right? So we had a lot of sponsorship. And we had a lot of responses. We had various cool companies come in, like Shapeshift came in. One of the exchanges, the name escapes me, but we did on a Saturday, I remember we did a whole learning hub where a lot of different companies just send their SMEs to present on different topics, where anybody who came in as an audience or as a participant of the hackathon, they could go and learn. So we had the hackathon, we had the learning hub, and then we have the actual conference where there were different talks. Okay. And yeah, I think it was actually pretty great. So 130 participants, and I think about 10 women got job offers there, and I think they're all accepted. So
oh, that's awesome.
So I think it was great. I also keep in touch with a lot of them, and I know that most of them moved into the space, not immediately, but throughout the years. So yeah, that was very interesting as well. So
that's a very good point, because we don't need people moving into DeFi doing finance, because that's quite a big move. We can get people like in the legal field where the kind of work you do is not that different. So if you're a regulation lawyer, instead of regulating options, you regulate decentralized options. And how do you explain that to regulators? How do you show them that how you like advise them on the ways that these decentralized structured products can be regulated?
Exactly. And the law firm, for example, that we're using right now for our stuff, the woman that I met at Ethereal, whatever at the time that I was building this hackathon, right? So she was also like kind of looking at the space and kind of because it was interesting for her. So she was from Tennessee. So we met there and we became very friendly. And then she came herself and she brought her daughter to the hackathon. And then what happened afterwards, she actually started a whole initiative in Tennessee where she was building like a whole coalition of lawyers to be able to create laws for this new technology at the state of Tennessee level. So she did that. And on top of that, she created a whole arm in her law firm so that they can take clients like, my company to help them think about all the different regulatory licenses that they need, anything else that you would need in the space. So she opened up a whole practice for that. So like, it really opens up a world of opportunities. And all she did, she went to one conference where we met and then something else happened. And like the whole thing kind of blew up for her. So yeah, that's exactly true. All you have to do is kind of like show a little bit of curiosity and start, talking to people and attending some of the events and being kind of open and willing to learn new things. And it's a very interesting world. You work with very smart people. So if you are not, kind of like really strapped for time, because when you work a full-time job, very often you are. But if you have that time, and you want to be, you're willing to learn and put yourself out there, I think that's, one of the ways to do so.
Yeah. And I think for looking at people who are not that strapped for time, that's where I'm looking at graduates, like fresh graduates, where they're still fresh enough, curious enough to figure out what the world is going on. And then also having the amount of the energy and time to go and explore different things. So I'm looking at a lot of graduates and trying to entice them into the space, not looking at gender specifically, but I get a lot of interested applicants who are female and wanting to come into the space, not doing analysis, but also doing other like front end development stuff. So that's actually a very good way to target or to get people into the space.
There's a lot of opportunity. I mean, everybody needs to do UI. And the other thing is UI and DeFi sucks. Everybody knows that, right? So we actually need good designers to come in and actually bring that knowledge from the enterprise space. So that's definitely one way to come in. Graphic designers are always needed. Like lawyers, so project managers are always in high demand because every initiative, every project needs project managers. So if you're a technical project manager, you can apply your skills there. If you know agile methodology, because everything we build is agile, that's the way to get in. In reality, when there is a will, there is a way. That's my opinion. So there's a lot to do. You don't have to go and do Solidity coding. There's so many other things you could be doing. So there's definitely options for that.
Zia, you wanted to add something just now?
Yeah, I mean, that was sort of what I was talking about earlier on, where I think there's a lot of opportunity for women. As Anna said, there's so many roles that make up the whole. And it's really about down to interest and what your specific interest is and kind of honing in on that and having conviction around that. Like conviction in this space is so important, right? Like in every kind of part of it. So like having conviction, like, okay, this is an area I really want to explore. And this is a part of it I'm going to really drill down into. And once you do that and you can kind of become an authority in that particular vertical within the space, you're really going to make inroads. So I think, having that conviction to kind of go into that, that particular interest that you have, and whether that's design in the space or legal and compliance, whatever it is. Once you have that and you drill down, you've really got an opportunity to become an authority and to really make a difference in the space. I think we are still pretty early, particularly in the iteration of DeFi. We're still early in that, so lots of opportunity, and I really encourage people to kind of dig in on their particular interests and do that.
So one thing that we talked about just now is that women seem to have a little bit more doubt than others. And I think that could be one of the barriers for learning. So how can we reduce this barrier? How can we either remove the doubt, decrease the doubt, or make it easier to have doubts?
That's a really good question. I mean, so I guess to my point before, conviction is really important. So, obviously conviction doesn't really work well with doubt. But I think, for me, it just took a little bit of experience, a little bit of time and kind of, digging in. Like I kind of said before, like digging in and getting my hands dirty. And, I have my own company because before, post or pre 2015, I was, I dabbled in crypto kind of personally. But then 2015, I really got into building a company in it. And, that, changed my perspective again. And so I think, a little bit of doubt is okay. I think it's kind of healthy in a way, like, because that way you're probably qualifying the things that you do. But I think the more that you drill down and focus and have conviction, the more that you'll kind of, that doubt will subside a little bit. And I think the ways in which we've spoken about, and bringing people in, educating people, encouraging them to kind of get into the roles, that will help people, kind of get rid of that doubt a little bit. And I think, like you say, like living with a bit of doubt is okay. But measuring it is important against what your particular action is. It's almost a psychology question, that one.
Jen, you want to say do you have questions to ask?
Yeah, sure. I've been enjoying the conversation so far, and I'm wondering, do you think that perhaps the DeFi is a unique enough space? What you're talking about is a lot about things that are applicable to women in tech in general. As someone who's been working as a woman in tech for quite a few years now, like I've experienced a lot of what you're talking about, right down to the stereotypes about limitations. And, this is the marketing woman, or, you do one graphic design job and you're labeled as a marketing intern forever. No one really seems to look much deeper than that. And I'm wondering how you deal with these kind of stereotypes in the industry. And do you think that perhaps decentralized finance might be an opportunity for, this to change based on like how do you think decentralization perhaps can differ from traditional finance? I guess it seems like you guys come from traditional finance backgrounds. I'm not entirely sure. Do you think we have a better opportunity here, or are we just repeating the same problems that I personally had in tech for 20 years?
So I certainly don't come from traditional finance. I'm kind of like from tech and startups. The optimistic side of me says, there is more opportunity. Like the ethos of decentralized finance for me is one of the things that really attracts me, right? And kind of creating a more level playing field for everybody, and allowing ownership for everybody, and control for everybody. So for me, my optimistic side said, we've got more opportunity to kind of change the script a bit. It's tempered by by a little bit of, I guess what society has done in the past. However, I see, for me, I think crypto and DeFi, or the decentralized kind of universe, for me, is like optimistically a bedrock for a huge shift in the way that society actually works. And this is, somewhat radical, I think, but I truly think that the way in which, and if we can keep the direction going positively, that we can, change the way in which society kind of works almost fundamentally because of this. And some people will say I'm radical on that, but I do think that there's an opportunity there. I see that we are also shifting as a society, in a lot of directions. So there's like a whole kind of movement, I think, happening at the moment. And I do think that decentralization has a big part to play in that. So yeah, that's kind of my sort of, I guess, broad take on it.
So to answer the question, hi Jen, by the way. Thank you for joining. I appreciate it. So I come from technology space. I don't come from traditional finance. I did work at companies like AIG. I worked at a hedge fund, but I was more on the technology, where running like financial transformation programs, for example. So I'm not a finance person per se. So, but corporate world and DeFi are two different animals completely. One thing I can tell you, I will never go back to corporate world. Like, you will have to put a bullet into my head for me to go back. I will tell you why. I will tell you why. It is highly political environment, especially Wall Street, where I actually did work for quite some time. And because of that, it's not about what you know. It's not about merit. It's not about knowledge. It's about how well you can manipulate people in situations. It's actually pretty sad. And I see that in DeFi, there is a huge opportunity for actually smart people that really want to build very smart things and make it better for masses and for future generations. There's definitely that philosophy that is driving this. And that's the fundamental difference. So I do think that girl that did a graphics over here, but she has so much more potential. She can do project management. She can do product marketing. She could do product design, possibly, just because, she's a well-versed girl, she'll have that opportunity. Nobody will tell you no, because in this space is really how much can you do? How much can you take on? Can you take this role? Can you do this activity? And all the projects that I've been part of and the projects that I've seen and the projects that I talk to, most of them that have that kind of philosophy.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say, and another thing that I think is interesting about this space is that, we're moving into a lot of, I guess, merit by proof. So, the more that you and kind of pseudonymous identities and things like that. So perhaps even gender will become less of a barrier, or less of even a thought, because, you may have whole teams working kind of pseudonymously. You don't even kind of know who they are. I do think there's some kind of work towards that, and they're proving their abilities kind of on chain, and there's interesting things kind of happening in that arena. So I think that's kind of, there's also potential to those barriers to not even be visible. Again, optimistically.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that.
Yeah, Zia, I agree with you too. And you brought up a very good point, actually, because this pseudo-anonymity, it's actually very true. Like, it doesn't matter who's actually behind the computer, as long as you can do great work, right? At the end of the day.
I do agree with what you're saying, but I do think that the meritocracy only can exist when there is an equality of opportunity, and when there's stereotypes about people in the industry that does kind of prevent those kind of equality of opportunity. There are assumptions and things to be overcome. But I do think that DAO structures, I'd love to hear more about how you guys are worked with it, because DAO structures being, in theory, decentralized and autonomous, do potentially provide a new opportunity for equalization of opportunities. I'd love to hear if you guys are incorporating that in your current projects right now.
No, absolutely. Like when we did our ECP program, which is the early contributor program, that's basically a new method to recruit into the DAO, right? So when we announced the project and we said, okay, guys, who wants to help out? And here are the roles, right? It was all in merit. It's like, what skills do you have? What can you contribute? What you can bring to the project? So for me, it was like, and that's easy, and unfortunately, 90% were male who applied. But there was a percentage of women that applied. But again, it was all really, what's the skill set? What can you bring to the table at the end of the day? So I think for DAOs, I think that's kind of where we are. It's really all about what value do you bring? Because we haven't seen anything other than that.
Yep. So I see that we're running out of time soon. So let me just bring Gabriel up as well, so he can ask the question that he has, and then we have to conclude soon. So Gabriel, please.
Hi. Even I just had a quick question for Zia and Anna. I hope you guys are well, by the way. For Anna specifically, obviously I've been following Force for a while now, and I just wanted to ask, what is your opinion on the future of DeFi in the bull and the bear market, and also the future of Force? Like, where do you want to bring it to? Like, what is the long-term plan?
Hi, Gabriel. So we're basically building. So if you're familiar with E-Trade, for example, or any other brokerage, right? Where today, if you are financially literate, this is where you would go and you would manage your portfolio, right? And then of course, you have Robinhood, which I found out recently. My 15-year-old has a Robinhood. I didn't know that. She's been investing. She knew everything about GameStop. I was like, wow, this generation is, definitely different from my generation, and so there is one for baby boomers, the other one is for millennials, right? So we are trying to build, something in between where anyone can come in and understand enough to be able to invest portion of their, retirement money safely. That's kind of number one thing, securely, and have better than average returns. Okay, so that's number one. Number two is we're definitely seeking alpha. We're building cross-chain. We're building cross-layer. We're also aware of very high gas fees, right? So we want to be interoperable as much as possible and kind of build that future platform. We are kind of calling it open hedge fund, autonomous hedge fund, whatever you want to call it. But in reality, we want to welcome different people that have math, economics, or strategies kind of skills to come and build with us, not just in a silo, but come build with us and deploy on our platform. And also, we are inviting different funds to put money in as well, of course, but there's a huge rise of retail investors, like I was saying previously. So a lot of people are putting in 30,000, 50,000. We're not a known team. We're a known team for that specific reason. I, for example, would be very uncomfortable putting money into Harvest because I don't know who the hell they are, for example, right? So that's for me, like, I don't know how people put money in there. So that number one thing for me was just to make sure that everybody knows who we are, and the people that putting money in, they can trust into what we're building. Security is actually paramount for us. Everybody says community. Community is super important, but God forbid you get wrecked, everything is gone. So we take security super, super seriously. That's why we only came out with 7 vaults that are very, very basic. They're stablecoin based because we think, that's much, less riskier. And everything else we're going to be rolling out. We have a huge roadmap. It hasn't been announced yet, but we have a lot of things coming up. but we are going to take our time, and we're going to go through proper audits, and we're going to take time to roll out all the different releases. Because, like I said, I think monthly we see reports of different platforms getting right. So for us, that's for now, that's number one priority. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, it's a great answer. Thanks very much. It's just one point that I picked out. You see the way you're talking about, just say, for example, people can put their part of their retirement money and stuff like that. Do you think that is beneficial to them in the bear market? Or is it beneficial just because we're in the bull, or even in the bear market, it's still beneficial? Like, are the yields still prosperous?
I think even in the bear market, when you are working with stable coins, I believe you will still be making better returns than in traditional markets. I do see that.
No problem. All right. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Gabriel. So we're running out of time. I know that someone wanted to speak as well. I'm sorry we can't do that. So let me just summarize, because I want to respect everyone's time. So we talked about how to get women into space. We want to lower the barrier to entries. So that could be mentoring, make it safer to enter, or maybe just to invest and explore crypto and DeFi. You don't have to put your entire portfolio there, but just understand what the space is. That's also very good. When entering in DeFi, it doesn't have to be finance backed. It can be in law, it can be in graphics, it can be doing front end, back end, a lot of different things. It doesn't have to be finance focused. Being a woman is good because you look at things in a more holistic view, but it's also bad because it gives you a lot more doubts. Sure, decision making can be fast, but the entire process could take a longer time. In DeFi, a lot of problems with women in DeFi is also the same with women in tech, and one of the ways that we could solve them is through DAOs. Not only the DAOs, but also pseudonymous identities online, being very merit focused, and also a lot of people are polymaths. So this gives more opportunities for people from a merit perspective. And in the future, and also one thing about fear of getting wrecked versus getting marginally wrecked to learn about risk management. That's also quite interesting. And well, thank you, Jen and Gabriel, for your questions. And thank you, Zia and Anna, for coming on board. It is very, very great to speak with you guys and you girls, and really, really enjoy this.
Thank you, Lisa, for moderating.
Thanks, Lisa, and hope we get to talk again. If anybody has questions offline, feel free to ping me on Twitter. My DMs are open, so always open to encouraging people. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, ladies.
Thanks. Bye.